Shalom Chaverim. Today, parashat Vayigash, and I'm delivering it from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm standing here at what is called the Arcade. It's actually the first indoor shopping mall here that was opened in 1890, and it was very fancy, still really gorgeous looking, as you can see. And it's just fitting that today we're gonna go back in history, and we're gonna talk about Vayigash and also bring in Thomas Paine. So let's start by his words. To Americans, that some desperate wretches should be willing to steal and enslave men by violence and murder for gain is rather lamentable than strange. But that many civilized, nay, Christianized people should approve and be concerned in the savage practice is surprising and still persists, though it has been so often proved contrary to the light of nature, to every principle of justice and humanity, and even good policy. So this paragraph was taken from a 1775 essay that is called African Slavery in America. And it was published anonymously, but it is believed to be written by Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was born in 1737, died in 1809. Now, when we attempt to really trace the beginning of what today is our known political spectrum, basically, progressivism and conservatism on two ends, when we try to trace the beginning of that political divide, usually one goes back to the French Revolution. And in fact, the even terms left and right when it comes to politics actually come from the French National Assembly sitting. So on the right sat those who wanted to defend tradition and the monarchy, and on the left happened to sit all the reformers and all the one that advocated for equality and secularism. And so those sitting arrangements is where we get the left and right. Now, when you think of great writers of the era, usually the two people most associated with these two political movements were Edmund Burke, the defender of tradition, and Thomas Paine, the defender of progress, or the advocate, if you will, for progress. And in his lifetime, Thomas Paine didn't just advocate for, or rather against slavery, but he was also very adamant about women's rights, suffrage, and especially with his very known common sense, independence from Britain, and then eventually also really a piece that goes against institutionalized religion with the Age of Reason, and so really a lot that he contributed. But today I want to focus on the essay that I brought in the beginning, which is called African Slavery in America. And really just, first of all, commend this essay, but also challenge some of Paine's writing. So in the paragraph that I read in the beginning, he said, when describing slavery, contrary to the light of nature. Now, when he says contrary to the light of nature, what he really refers to is Genesis. He refers to, chapter 1, verse 27, ויברא אלוהים את האדם בצלמו, בצלם אלוהים ברא אותו, זכר ונקבה ברא אותם. Okay, so basically the famous verse about men and women were created in the image of God, therefore all human beings are equal, and there's no one has the right to enslave another. So this is the reference that he makes to Genesis. And he even mentions that it's shocking to him that some masters who own slaves actually draw permission from Scripture And I'm going to quote directly from him. He says, most shocking of all is alleging the sacred scriptures to favor this wicked practice. So he brings that. However, and this is where I want to challenge the essay, later on in that same paragraph he says, but some say the practice was permitted to the Jews, to which may be replied, the example of the Jews in many things may not be imitated by us. And he proceeds to describe the Torah as lots of acts of Jewish savagery, basically saying we are not following that as Christians, etc., etc. He does mention that the Torah forbade enslaving prisoners of war. So I read this and I was thinking, okay, so what does our tradition think about slavery and what is our approach? Okay, so first of all, Torah, right? So the Torah acknowledges the existence of slavery, but it puts, which was very radical to that time that it was written, it puts a lot of limitations and protections on that practice, if you will. And basically, it doesn't seize or refuses to see slaves as tradable commodity, but rather as human beings with rights that deserve protection. And some of those protections are, for example, that the period of enslavement should never be more than 6 years, that there should never be any psychological or physical abuse of slaves because it's going to be severely punished, and that, of course, there's a time, the Jubilee, where all slaves are set free, and there are mentions of benefits for slaves such as rest on Shabbat. Later on, our prophets really look at the messianic promise as part of the messianic promise as the release of slaves. You can find it in Isaiah. In the Talmud, it even goes as so far as say, Kol hakone eved divri kekone adon le'atzmo, which translates to anyone who acquires a Hebrew slave like one who... Anyone who acquires a Hebrew slave like one who acquires a master from himself. So for himself. This is from Kiddushin. Basically what he says, if you take a slave, you should treat that slave like they are your master. And you can see in the Talmud, in all of the occasions that it is mentioned, the protections, the rights are so severe that our sages want to basically suffocate slavery from within, saying it's not worth it. You should treat them like they are your masters. What is the connection to Vayigash? So in our portion, at the end of the portion, really after all the drama of Joseph and his brothers has ended, after they cried on each other's shoulders, and after everything was revealed and the family was brought to Egypt and to settle there, after all of this drama has ended, there is an actual description of how Joseph managed the famine in Egypt. So we know that he was the second to the king. We know that he was in charge of all the food storage. But how exactly did he manage that food supply? This is actually detailed at the end of the portion, at the end of Vayigash. And there's something really fascinating, because what it says is that in the first year of the famine, the people of Egypt came to Joseph and the money ran out. And they said, we don't have any more money to pay for food. We are going to die. What are you going to do about it? And so Joseph said, and this is all quoted in the Torah, the verse numbers could be found in the column, and Joseph says, okay, you don't have money, I will buy your cattle. I will buy your cattle, and this is exactly what happens. And then the people gain through that another year of food supply. And then in the second year, they come to Joseph again and they said, we ran out of food, we don't have cattle, we are going to die, we don't know what we're going to do. And what they offer is they offer their land and they also offer themselves. They basically say to Joseph, buy us as slaves. We want to be slaves to the king because we have no options left. And what the Torah mentions is that what Joseph does is not buying them. He buys their land and he spread them around their lands, and he gives them seeds, and he says, go work those lands, have your own food, and all I'm asking in return is a tax, a 20% tax. 20% tax, very reasonable. And they, of course, accept at first, but some of them are uncomfortable because they're not sure that they will be successful and still want to become slaves, and he refuses. And I want to bring here Ha'amek Davar, which is basically a Natziv, Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, known as HaNatziv. His Torah commentary is called Ha'amek Davar. And he's interpreting this verse, ויאמרו החייתנו נמצא חן בעיני אדוני והיינו עבדים לפרעה. Okay, so it's basically when they say, they are very grateful for Joseph's solution, and they said, you have saved our lives, we are grateful to my Lord, and we shall be serfs to Pharaoh. So Ha'amek Davar said, Echyetanu, basically what's translated here to saved our life, is that you gave us life of freedom. And then Natziv continue and says, והיינו עבדים לפרעה, אז השם מספיק צרכנו, אם עשה שדה מעט או הרבה, אבל יוסף לא נתרצה לדבריהם. So what Ha'amek Davar is saying here is that when they pleaded, or when they were worried that they will not be able to work their fields, Joseph refused still to enslave them. And I think that it's really, really ironic. The generations later, it was the Israelites themselves, or Joseph's family's descendants, if you will, that became slaves in Egypt. And in the book of Exodus, really in the beginning, it is mentioned that Pharaoh that enslaves the Israelites did not know Joseph. And perhaps did not know Joseph did not know what Joseph did in our portion. That even in the harshest times, when the people themselves came and pleaded to become slaves, he refused. This is not our way, and we are not enslaving people. So, Thomas Paine may not have been a great scholar of Judaism, but nonetheless, his essay was really, really, really important and commendable, and some say it may have inspired the founding of the Pennsylvania Society for the abolition of slavery. So it is definitely should be placed with honor and respect. And the rest, as they say, is history. Shabbat Shalom.